My name's Claire, and I'm 22 years old. I've always been someone who enjoys the chaos of life, always surrounded by people, always in motion. But after my breakup a month ago, everything's changed. I thought I could handle it, but the weight of it all settled in slowly, crushing me until I felt like I couldn't breathe. I needed a break, a real one. That's why I decided to go camping alone. I had this idea that being out in nature, away from everything, would clear my mind. It was just supposed to be a weekend getaway. No phones, no distractions, no one to remind me of what I was running from. I rented a small cabin by a secluded lake deep in the woods. It was the kind of place you don't find on maps, far from anything, untouched by the constant buzz of civilization. I arrived in the late afternoon. The air was crisp, the smell of pine filling my lungs. As I unpacked, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. The solitude was everything I needed. I felt calm, at peace. I thought that being here, surrounded by nothing but trees and the sounds of nature, might finally help me find a way to move on. That first evening was perfect. I sat by the fire, listening to the crackling of the wood as the sun dipped below the horizon. It was peaceful, beautiful even. But as the darkness settled in, I started to notice things. Small things at first. There was a rustling in the woods just beyond the edge of the cabin, but when I turned to look, nothing was there. The trees swayed in the wind, their branches creaking. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself it was just an animal or the wind, but something about it didn't feel natural. The next morning, I set off on a hike around the lake. The forest was thick with trees, the air cool and damp. As I walked, I noticed something that made my heart skip. Footprints, large ones, not animal prints, but human-like. They were barely visible in the dirt, as though someone had walked there recently. I stopped, scanning the area, but saw no sign of anyone else. I pushed the thought away, telling myself it was probably just someone else who'd passed by before me. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Later, as I sat by the lake, something strange happened. The wind changed direction, and I caught a smell in the air, like damp earth mixed with something metallic, almost like blood. I couldn't place it. The breeze ruffled the surface of the water, sending ripples across the stillness, but the smell lingered, thick and unnerving. I glanced around, half expecting to see someone behind me, but there was nothing. The whispering started that evening, just a soft murmur, like the wind was carrying voices, but I couldn't make out the words. I brushed it off as my imagination, a product of the silence surrounding me, but it happened again and again. Claire, I froze. It was faint at first, like a soft breath against my ear, but there was no one there. I stood up, feeling a chill crawl down my spine, and scanned the woods. Nothing. That night, the whispers came again. This time they were louder, and they weren't just calling my name. They were saying things I couldn't understand, but the tone was unmistakable, pleading, desperate. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, the beam slicing through the darkness. The trees stood still, their silhouettes casting eerie shadows on the ground. I called out, hoping to break the silence, but all I heard in response was the wind and those whispers. Claire. I stepped forward, my heart racing, my breath shallow. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't my imagination. The voices were real, coming from just beyond the trees. My legs moved on their own, pulling me forward, despite the terror clawing at my chest. The closer I got, the colder the air became, like I was walking through a void. When I reached the edge of the forest, I saw it, a figure. At first it looked like a shadow, but it was too tall, too thin. It stood motionless, its back to me. My breath caught in my throat, and I stepped back, but my feet wouldn't move. Then it turned. Its face wasn't a face. There were hollow eyes, dark pits where its eyes should have been, and a wide, unnatural grin stretching across its face. I couldn't scream. My throat felt tight, as though the air itself was choking me. It didn't move at first, just stood there, watching me. But then, slowly, it began to move toward me, its limbs jerking at odd angles, unnaturally stiff. I turned and ran, the flashlight bouncing wildly in my hand. I could hear it behind me, those footsteps, slow but deliberate, echoing through the woods. I could feel its presence, growing closer. I reached the cabin door, my hand shaking as I fumbled for the key. The door opened with a creak, and I slammed it shut behind me. But I could hear it outside, scratching, like claws against wood. Then it stopped. The silence was deafening. I stayed inside, heart pounding in my chest, waiting for the sun to rise. The night felt endless, and every creak of the cabin made me flinch. But when daylight finally broke through the trees, I ventured outside, half expecting to see the figure still there, standing just beyond the trees. But there was nothing. The forest was as still as it had been before, and the only sound was the rustling of the leaves in the wind. I tried to shake the terror off, telling myself it had been a dream, or my mind playing tricks. But when I went to check the door, I saw it, claw marks, deep and jagged, etched into the wood. I never went back. The car ride out of those woods was the longest I've ever had. The entire time, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see it standing there in the distance, watching me. I've been home for a few weeks now, but sometimes, in the quiet moments, I swear I hear it. It's whispers, calling my name. And I can't help but wonder, is it still out there, waiting for me to return?